So let me get this straight. We're trading canola for electric cars. Canola. For cars. I mean, I knew Canadian politics was getting interesting, but this? This is like showing up to a car dealership with a sack of vegetables and walking out with a Tesla. Except the Tesla costs half as much as everyone else's, might undercut our entire auto industry, and oh yeah, Doug Ford is absolutely losing his mind over it. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where today we're diving into the hottest trade deal drama since the last time we made a questionable deal with someone. Mark Carney just shook hands with China on a deal that's got Ontario's premier seeing red, and honestly? Buckle up, because this one's a roller coaster. Alright, so here's what went down. Prime Minister Mark Carney, fresh off his victory tour of trying to convince Canadians he's not just Justin Trudeau in a nicer suit, decided Friday was a great day to announce he'd struck a deal with China. And what a deal it is. China's going to ease up on tariffs for Canadian canola, some seafood, and vegetables. You know, the stuff we grow and catch. In exchange, Canada's rolling out the red carpet for up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles per year at a measly 6.1% tariff. That's it. 6.1%. For context, that's less than what you pay in sales tax on a coffee in most provinces. Now, Carney's out here doing his best game show host impression, telling Canadians this is only going to be 3% of our market. 3%. No big deal, right? Just a tiny slice of the pie. Except Doug Ford is standing in Ontario like a dad who just found out you traded the family car for magic beans, and he is not having it. Ford took to X, because of course he did, where else do politicians air their grievances these days, and drop this absolute gem. Make no mistake, China now has a foothold in the Canadian market and will use it to their full advantage at the expense of Canadian workers. Now, Doug Ford being angry about something is not exactly breaking news. The man's got opinions, and has never been shy about sharing them. But this time? This time he's got a point that's harder to ignore than usual. Earlier this week, Ford went on record saying he was, and I quote, 100% dead against this deal. Not 99%. Not mostly against it. 100% dead against it. That's the political equivalent of writing in all caps with 17 exclamation marks. And why is he so fired up? Because Ontario is basically Canada's auto manufacturing heartland. We're talking jobs, factories, entire communities built around making vehicles. Ford's looking at this deal and seeing a flood of cheaper Chinese EVs washing over the border like a tidal wave at a sandcastle competition. These aren't just any EVs either. Chinese electric vehicles are cheap. Like, really cheap. Like, how is this even possible cheap? We're talking vehicles that could sell for thousands less than Canadian-made alternatives, and suddenly our domestic manufacturers are competing with one hand tied behind their backs. But let's talk about what we're getting in return, because apparently canola is our secret weapon now. China's easing tariffs on Canadian canola, seafood, and vegetables. Now, don't get me wrong, I love our canola farmers. They're out there doing the Lord's work, growing the stuff that becomes everything from cooking oil to biodiesel. And our seafood industry? Absolutely crucial, especially on the coasts. But here's the thing that's got people scratching their heads. We're trading agricultural access for potential automotive devastation. It's like showing up to a negotiation and saying, hey, we'll let you sell way more cars here and potentially undermine thousands of manufacturing jobs, but in exchange, you have to buy more of our broccoli. I mean, yes, agricultural exports are important. They're worth billions to our economy. But the auto sector? That's not just about money, that's about entire regional economies, supply chains, skilled workers, and decades of industrial infrastructure. Here's where it gets really spicy though. This isn't just about Doug Ford versus Mark Carney in a political cage match, although that would probably get better ratings than most Hockey Night in Canada games these days. This is about a fundamental question facing Canada right now. How do we balance trade relationships, especially with China, against protecting our domestic industries? Because let's be real, our relationship with China has been, shall we say, complicated. We've had the whole Huawei situation, the two Michaels, the constant back and forth over human rights concerns, and now this. China's a massive market, and Canadian exporters would love better access to it. Our farmers, our fishers, our resource sector, they're all looking at China's population and seeing dollar signs. But every time we make a deal, there's this nagging question in the background. What are we giving up to get it? Carney's betting that 3% of the market is a manageable risk. He's probably got economists and trade experts telling him that this opens doors for Canadian exporters, that it's a net positive for the economy as a whole, that we need to think beyond just one sector. And maybe he's right. Maybe 49,000 Chinese EVs spread across the entire Canadian market won't be the apocalypse Ford's predicting. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Those EVs aren't going to be evenly distributed across Canada like some kind of automotive socialist dream. They're going to go where the buyers are, and a big chunk of those buyers are in places like Ontario. Places where Canadian auto workers are already nervous about the transition to electric vehicles, about whether there'll be jobs for them in this new green economy we keep hearing about. Places where entire towns have been built around automotive manufacturing, and the thought of cheap foreign competition isn't just an economic policy debate, it's an existential threat. And this is where Ford's actually connecting with people's real concerns. You can argue about trade policy until you're blue in the face, but when you're a worker at an auto plant in Oakville or Windsor, and you're hearing that tens of thousands of vehicles that cost way less than what your plant makes are about to flood the market, the math gets pretty simple and pretty scary pretty fast. These workers aren't anti-trade. They're not even necessarily anti-China. But they are pro-having jobs, and they're pro-not getting undercut by vehicles produced in a country with different labor standards, different environmental regulations, and different cost structures. It's hard to compete when you're playing by different rules, and that's exactly what Ford's hammering home. Now, to be fair to Carney, because apparently I'm feeling generous today, he's trying to walk a political tightrope while juggling chainsaws during an earthquake. He's got agricultural provinces that desperately want better market access to China. He's got climate targets that require massive EV adoption, and cheaper EVs could accelerate that. He's got a relationship with China that's been frosty for years and could use some warming up. And he's got opposition premiers like Ford ready to pounce on anything that looks like weakness or betrayal of Canadian workers. The 6.1% tariff isn't nothing. It's lower than what we had before, sure, but it's not zero. Carney's team is probably arguing that this strikes a balance, that it gives Canadian manufacturers room to compete while still allowing some Chinese vehicles in to increase consumer choice and drive down prices. Because let's not forget, Canadian consumers are dealing with some of the highest vehicle prices in the world right now, and cheaper options might actually be welcome in a lot of households. But here's the political reality. Doug Ford smells blood in the water, and he's circling. This is a gift-wrapped opportunity to position himself as the defender of Ontario workers against Ottawa's trade policies. Whether the deal actually ends up hurting Canadian workers or not almost doesn't matter at this point. The narrative is set. Ford's the tough guy standing up for the little guy, and Carney's the politician who sold out Canadian jobs for canola. And in Canadian politics, especially with everything else going on right now, narratives matter more than nuance. Most people aren't going to read the full text of the trade agreement. They're not going to analyze the economic modeling or compare tariff structures. They're going to hear China gets easier access to our market and might hurt Canadian workers, and that's going to stick. So where does this leave us? Well, we've got a deal that's done, a premier who's furious, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what happens next. Will those 49,000 Chinese EVs actually materialize? Will they undercut Canadian manufacturers the way Ford predicts? Will the agricultural gains be worth it? Will this help Canada hit its climate targets? Will consumers benefit from more choice and lower prices? Honestly, we're probably going to find out over the next few years, and it's going to be messy. Because here's the thing about trade deals. They're basically educated guesses about the future wrapped up in diplomatic language and economic projections. Sometimes they work out great. Sometimes they blow up in your face. And sometimes they're just kind of fine, and everyone moves on to being outraged about something else. But for now, we've got peak Canadian political drama. Canola versus cars. Ottawa versus Ontario. Economic theory versus workers' reality. And Doug Ford versus Mark Carney in what might be the spiciest interprovincial beef since yesterday probably, because this is Canadian politics and there's always something. What do you think? Is Ford right to be sounding the alarm, or is this much ado about 3% of the market? Are you team protect Canadian workers or team cheaper EVs for everyone? Let me know in the comments, because I genuinely want to hear what you think about this one. And hey, if you made it this far, you clearly care about Canadian politics as much as I do, which means you're either informed or insane, possibly both. So smash that subscribe button for Canadian insights, because we're putting out videos all day, every day, keeping you updated on all the political chaos this beautiful country can produce. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode of What's Canada Arguing About Now. Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and maybe go hug a canola farmer. They're having a weird week.